You joined us for Rain of Blood, and together we made it rain bigger and better than we could have ever imagined. So now, join us for a second blazing inferno of knowledge and exploration. You're listening to Rain of Fire, the scorching sequel event to Rain of Blood, where we're going to delve into the world of fireplay education and safety as we prepare for the upcoming Rain of Fire event. Join your host, Miss Kitten, Radically Dark, and Ember Solaris as we ignite your curiosity and stoke the flames of passion with discussions, interviews, and authentic insights from around the globe. Together, we're three flames united in one mission to make quality kink education more accessible and open pathways to conversation and connection about edgeplay topics around the world. But before we dive into these sizzling topics, a content warning. Rain of Fire discusses mature themes, explicit content, and practices related to BDSM and fireplay. So listener discretion is advised, and this is an adult-only podcast. Other topics may include mental health, trauma, consent, and more. So please be sure you're in a good spot to engage in these topics before continuing to listen. So, grab your fire gear, stoke the flames of curiosity, and let's embark on this crackling journey together. Welcome to Rain of Fire.
Hey, amazing fire starters. Welcome back to my podcast. I have been a bit absent this week. My laptop has been in for repair, but I have my beautiful baby back, and I have an incredibly beautiful human who I'm really excited to chat to. Littlest Ducky is in my dungeon virtually all the way from the States, coming to talk to me about some hot topics tonight. Welcome, Ducky. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi. Glad to be here as always. Always a good chance to talk to you, Miss Kitten.
Thank you. I've been following you quite closely after Rain of Blood, and I really feel connected, and I was really pleased that you said yes. So I'm really grateful that you are here. I know a little bit about you, and I have a lot of time and respect for you, but I don't think all my listeners know. So maybe you can give the listeners a little bit of a 101 on how you went from being having a normal muggle life to having this awesome kinky life that you embrace so authentically.
Yeah, so my start in kink was a little bit on, some people would say, the non-traditional side. When I was in high school, I was actually terrified of the concept of kink because of someone in my life that had brought up the terms, and he was one of the most sexually open people I knew, and he was terrified of it. He was like, nope, I won't even tell you. Like, I'll tell you what those letters mean, BDSM, and then I'm not letting you touch anything else. I was a very, very innocent Catholic schoolgirl at the time, and as much as I am very much not now, I was. And so, of course, I started looking into it, and it wasn't until I started trying to get out of a problematic dynamic that I had gotten to from being on Fetlife that I actually started to want to get involved in the public scene. I ended up popping by my first munch that someone had suggested from online, got terrified and ran away, told someone else about it. They went and then got me to start going. So somehow the people I got to go to their first public munch got me to go to my first real munches, which is always entertaining. I got started in the rope world because that's what my local community at the time did. We had a pretty small, mostly TNG community up there. And over time, that has evolved a lot as I've grown more into myself as well as more into the community and kind of found my place here.
I love that, Ducky. I have this really cool scene image in my head with you in a little Catholic schoolgirl uniform. I have to warn you that there's definitely something about you being a Catholic schoolgirl that makes me smile.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't play into it much.
I was also a Catholic schoolgirl, except I was terribly naughty and really badly behaved, and the poor nuns in my convent spent hours trying to put me on the right track, and they were hugely unsuccessful. So, but yeah, definitely a different era. I from doing all these podcasts and speaking to a lot of youngsters, I mean, they make me feel very old. I think we had less access to sort of internet and to information, and I think it was a bit more of a struggle getting into kink when I got into kink. So, but I'm glad you finally found your tribe, and I'm glad your tribe makes you so happy and gives you a space to be authentic in.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they really make my life.
Yeah, they do. You always look so happy after you spend time with them. We are chatting tonight a little bit about fire, because it's rain of fire. That was really obvious. But I'm on this like path of cigars and cigar play, and I'm absolutely just loving it. Like, it's just something I never expected to be enthralled by, and not just, and I'm sort of approaching it from a top and a bottom perspective. Like, I'm loving both sides. Definitely fills my switchy heart with glee, because I think I could fit into both roles. But you've had some experience in it, and you are happy to chat to us a little bit about it tonight. Do you want to tell me about your journey with cigars and how you got involved in the kink, and how the kink plays out in your life a little bit?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I honestly, when I started in the scene, I had no real interest in fire play. Like, I gave it a shot. I've done it a couple times, but like, it's not really my thing on the bottom side. Like, I'm open to it if someone's like real gung ho about it, but yeah, it's not really my thing. But I was going to my first kink convention up in Georgia at Frolicon in 2021. And one of the classes that was offered was a cigar service class. And one of the things that I was really interested in, but never really explored early on in my kink journey, was the more service side of things. And I had a huge interest, but I never really knew how to approach that dynamic in a way. And I had tried, but not really found a spot where I felt comfortable. And so I made a point of going to that class, because despite the fact that I don't smoke anything, I haven't, and I don't really ever plan to, I still was interested in giving that service specifically because of its connections, especially locally, to the leather community. And I had been seeing them around and hearing them talked about. I mean, I'm in Tampa. I'm right near Ybor City. We've got some real good cigars here. And so I had seen my local leather folk, who I had been interested in getting to know more, smoking them. So I went to this class with an amazing presenter who I am eternally grateful for, out of the Atlanta area, who goes by Attorney Lady Steele. And she gave an amazing class, followed by a demonstration out on one of the porches. And watching the entirety of the process from start to smoke, and then the connection that lasted even during the smoke for the portion that they were teaching, just the energy that radiated off of them made me super interested. And I, at the time, was talking with someone I had met at the convention, and they offered to join me for the demo because they also had some sticks to share. And so we were able to try some of the skills that were shared. And despite some problematic things that happened during that and after that with that person, that moment was still extremely special. And it's something I still hold really close to me, even though he and I do not interact at this point. It really sparked a huge love of the service side of it. And then as time has gone on, I've gotten to learn more. A few months after that, he gave me my first cigar burn, my first brand with a cigar. And then over time, I've gotten to experience more with the play, especially since I met my master last year at the same con, 2023 Frolicon. We met and got to explore some of the play side of cigars, which I had seen and done little bits of, but getting to experience that on a more holistic and wider scale, getting to go from there and really diving into it with him. It's become especially important to me now, knowing that it's something that he values. And so I know you and I had been talking about this because I had brought up at Self a couple weeks back that I was really looking forward to cigar time, and getting to share that time with him is one of the best times he and I get to share together, especially since we're long distance right now. And so we get together, and that's one of those times we can sit back and spend and share.
I think the tradition that goes behind the whole cigar service also, like you said, captivates you because of the leather community. But I think just the tradition that is in every item that goes into a kit, and in the way you even just handle the cigar, how you open it and how you present it. And like, there's just so much legacy in every movement that is contained in a service, that even for someone like me I'm so not DS orientated. I'm so not a service kitten, but I actually have huge joy in the process of presenting somebody with a cigar. Like, there's just to be good at the process and have a good understanding and have good control over all the bits that go into it. Like, it fills me with absolute joy. So I can definitely relate to the service side of it. For the first time in my life, it's something that's like, yeah, I could happily kneel down and serve somebody a cigar beautifully with care and with pride. Like, it's something that really just ticks my box for some reason. I could equally have somebody serve me a cigar and I could smoke it and enjoy them as an ashtray. So like, it really makes me quite excited. I love that you find intimacy in it, because I think there's so much beautiful skill involved in the process that it is intimate. And the other thing that really strikes me with the whole thing is that chunk of time that you donate to the process, that you set aside. Like, I don't do that enough in my life. Like, I don't spend enough time separating a piece of my day out for something that's simple and beautiful and honest and real and authentic, and that I really just am present doing. My day job's pretty crazy and life can be pretty crazy, and we're always rushing from one point to the other. So I've just really enjoyed that section of time where I'm present in the moment. Like, it's besides sharps, it's something that I really feel quite drawn to. I'm fascinated by the burn thing. It's something I haven't been brave enough to try yet. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about that and how that experience played out for you, and how it felt? And yeah, I have like a million questions, you know me.
Oh, totally. It's one of my favorite things. I will admit, when I got my first burn, so because I am an edge player, and you very much know that, and of course, basically everything in fire is already, I have a weird risk profile, so I do like to throw that out there, because I don't necessarily think all of the choices I make are ones that I would recommend for others. Because there are times where I will take higher safety risks when I trust someone, and I am open to doing that. I did make a mistake when I did my first burn, and I went into it not knowing all of the risks, and trusting that the person did in a way that we hadn't fully communicated about. And now I'm much better about communicating and making sure both parties know at least what the risks are of that. And I'm grateful it went well. But yeah, it was something that we wanted to take as a kind of step towards connection and growth together. And it's something I've actually done a couple of times. I want to say 3 at this point. The first one with that first person, the second one with my master over that first burn, and then a third one this spring in memory of a play partner who passed away a few months prior to that, which was a whole thing. And despite the fact that they fade, they do have a level of permanency. So it's not something I necessarily take lightly. And within my current protocols and rules, I can't take them without specifically getting my master's permission to get them from anyone else. And I currently would doubt he would let anyone else do that to me at this point, because it is something so intimately ours. But I will say that it is a very high risk and outside the risk profile of even most cigar players. It was kind of implied to me early on that it might be more common than it is. And I have since learned that it is not a common thing to do, and definitely not multiple times the way I enjoy it. But basically, when he is getting done with where he wants to smoke the cigar to, he'll go ahead and tap off whatever ash is on there and give it a second to cool down, because we don't want it quite red hot just being puffed. But you give it about 30 seconds a minute, and then he just picks a spot and presses it to the skin and puts it out that way. We acknowledge that this is not the traditional way to put out a cigar, because generally best practice would be to set it and let it go out on its own. You don't do the thing where you smush it like a cigarette and make it go out. However, in this case, we do put it fully out on the skin. It is a full open burn like a brand in other cases. I'll say the healing on those was definitely a little bit harsher than the healing of the cell popping, the micro branding that I've had done. But really, it's not that bad. It hurts in the moment.
It hurts.
But honestly, just like with most things, like once you get past, it's like the main part of your nerves is in that top layer of the skin, because that's where the sensory nerves need to be, because that's where you feel things. So once you burn them, they don't hurt. It just hurts until you burn them, which is a big pain, but only for about 5 seconds.
Okay. You spoke a little bit in the beginning about the first time you did it, you weren't quite aware of the risks. What does present Ducky know that past Ducky didn't know about cigar burns? What are you more aware of going into a burn now, and what things are really important?
I mean, there's a few things to be actively aware of. I mean, first off, just like any traditional burn, like you have to be able to take care of it. So we put it in a spot where I could reach, thankfully, but wasn't the most convenient because it was weirdly on my ass. Not the easiest place to take care of the first time. And so had I known, I maybe would have suggested another placement.
Okay.
So stuff like that, and the care afterwards, which thankfully we were able to get what I needed once I realized what I needed. But now within my kit, partially in my cigar kit, but mostly in my aftercare and safety kit, I keep things that help with burns. I keep burn gel. I keep Tegaderm to cover it, which I have obviously also for sharps and all of that. But the medical side is also important. But also, as much as it's not medically backed from anything I can find, there is risk associated with putting ash and tobacco into the skin. Is kind of something I've come to realize. Like, it's not, you shouldn't be getting any sort of like reaction the way you would if you smoke it, but introducing that type of thing into an open wound is a bit higher risk than, say, a brand where you've already cleaned the tool. And so it's, if not sterile, at least disinfected. You can't really disinfect a cigar.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does, definitely. And what's interesting for me is, so branding and stuff in my community has a whole bunch of really old wives' tales about how to aggravate the brand to encourage the scar to remain. So kind of growing up in the community, listening to all these stories about branding and how they suggest you take care of the branding, which I'm always terrified to tell anybody on air because I really don't want to encourage anybody to do these things. But some of the old wives' tales include things like rubbing ash into the wound to aggravate it or to disrupt the healing process so that the scarification is more intense in the final result and stuff like that. So like it's something that I think there is a lot of there are a lot of rumors about. So I think it's important to have the gold standard and to understand what happens when you actually burn the skin and what happens to the different layers of the skin and how the heat affects that, and the heat can carry on burning through the skin, and then how to take care of it in a way that keeps it as sterile as clean as possible, and prevents further infection and encourages the best possible healing, I think is the best way to go. So I think you don't know what you don't know. So the first time you do anything, my first plays with anything are normally a bit crazy, and I'm normally better by the third time.
But honestly, that's something I actually attended a class at a con in December last year about branding because I do have my micro-branded duck on my chest, and I was actually looking to get it updated because it does start to fade over time. And I had gotten permission from my master that depending on who it was, if I got permission and could vet them clearly, that I could have someone do that. And so I went to the class on branding. It covered micro-branding and strike branding type things. And that's one of the things they talked about. And in the course of the class, I was actually talking with someone who I've played with before, who I trust, who has a medical background. And one of the things they were telling me, and they're also someone who has bottomed for multiple brands of different types. And from his expertise in his field of medicine, he was saying, you can always rebrand it. You can't necessarily always recover from the infectious disease you can get from putting things in the brand. And to be clear, I'm not quoting him, I'm rephrasing it. But effectively, by aggravating it, reopening it, introducing new things to it, you are exposing your body to more things, and it becomes a higher risk of infection. And some of the infectious diseases, especially with these larger brands that we do sometimes, I mean, depending on the size of the cigar, it's not a small burn. You're opening yourself up to more of that. And depending on what you're using to aggravate it, if you're rubbing things that are not disinfected into it, theoretically, ash should be relatively fine because it's gotten the heat from disinfection. But depending on what's in it, who's smoking it, all of that, you never know what's going to get on your skin from that. And so it is up to each person and their risk profile, what they want to put on their burn. But I definitely have gotten more careful about that. Like, I used to just aggravate them, not even worry about like washing my hands before doing it. And I'm like, now I'm at least going to wash my hands very carefully. If I'm going to aggravate it, put a covering back on it immediately to make sure that if you're going to take that risk of aggravating, you're at least doing so in a responsible way.
Yeah, I think the one thing that kink has been really empowering for me is appreciating how my body heals. Like, I have such appreciation for being able to take care of my body properly so that my canvas is able to be used again. And I've really enjoyed the journey that has given me. It's really been something that I've got better at, and I am so much better about looking after myself because of it. So I'm always really keen to give my body the best chance to heal. And I really actually love watching my body's response to healing. And I think anything like a cutting or a scarification, like I'm always just amazed at how incredible my skin is in its response to something like that. And I think that there is enough of a journey for me in watching how scars change and how the body changes them and how the body has this whole own mechanism for fixing itself, and all I have to do is just look after it, and it does well. The one thing I have found quite interesting using bigger needles is if I don't melt the scab. So if I manage to keep the scab on the wound and I don't get it wet and I don't let the scab melt off, like I can't think of a better way to explain it than melt's probably not the right word, but if I get it really wet and soggy and the scab comes off, generally that makes that automatically scars, and you can see the needle marks afterwards. Whereas if I'm able to keep the scar and keep the scab and leave it intact without making it melt off, again that word, I don't know why that's the only word in my head about this in topic, there's virtually no scar left at the end of the day. So just something like that can even impact how the wound heals. I would be very loath to aggravate it in some really scary ways, and I'm not quite sure I would be in the garden rubbing ash from the fireplace in my leg on a Tuesday morning after a play on a Saturday. I'm not sure I'm that person or that's my risk profile, but it's definitely a story that's out there, and it's definitely stuff that people are talking about. And I definitely heard it a good couple of times, especially the micro branding. It's like it always came up with micro branding. Like if you want to, you've either got to aggravate it by rubbing salt in it, or like, you can't just leave it because it's going to disappear over time. But I like what you said about your micro brand and how you can reapproach it now and you can have it done again. So like although it is on your body for a certain period of time, you always have the choice to go and spruce it up and add to it and have the experience again, which I think is important.
Another weird one. I don't know how much you've heard this one popping up talking about branding, because I don't do much with branding outside of the cigars. Like I have the one that gets touched up and needs it again soon. But I minimize my permanent marking because of my rules. But something I heard tossed around and also been told is extremely improvably false is that you should not close a brand because the skin will die off or something like that. I've heard that that's an old tale that is completely inaccurate.
So Duckey, I've heard some interesting things with that. So I've heard that you shouldn't close the brand off around the base of a limb. So if you did like an ankle bracelet and you went the whole way around the ankle, that could be seriously dangerous. And in fact, I read a really horrific story on the be all and end all of, the newsworthy source of Fetlife. So I'm not quite sure how great my source is on this. Please don't quote me on it, people. But that if you go too deep, and that happened in this case, they did a brand using the sun. So they burnt it into the skin and they went all the way around the ankle. And then they'd gone too deep because you obviously can't control the depth of something like that as like you can with micro branding or something else. Strike branding is also difficult to control the depth, but and the skin started to die off from underneath the brand and the whole foot got infected and they ended up in hospital. It was quite serious.
So you would have to go super, super deep and it would have to be a limb. I've heard people saying you shouldn't even like close designs on a singular surface, which just the way skin heals is bottom to top. So that's not actually an issue. Like my duck was a fully closed brand. No issues with that. But I could see how going around an entirety of a limb in that sort of thing, if you were doing a deeper type of brand, not like a micro branding situation.
I think that brand, in that case with that brand, is that they didn't control the depth of the brand, and the brand went too deep, number one. So that probably had more impact on how the wound healed than the fact that they closed it off. And then I think because they closed it off, and they closed it off on a limb where the blood supply wasn't great, I think your feet are probably the worst place to aim for anyway. But apparently the experience was really, really, really super intense. And hats off to the masochist who sat through the branding, because I think that must have been a little bit more than a burn. I think that must have been quite an intensive experience. So well done for getting through that. And I'm really sorry that it ended badly, but thank you for teaching all of us a little bit more about not getting our ankles branded. And I do think about these stories like at 3:00 in the morning when I'm making all these bad decisions for my next future self. But I've seen a lot of micro brands that have been closed off, and I've spoken to a couple of the branding guys, and they weren't ridiculous about it. I suppose again it depends on the depth that you're going. Really, I think that would probably have a huge influence. I think we should ask Solaris to check in on this, because she'd probably have better feedback than my guesses, because that's literally what they are. But yeah, I think all of this information is good information, and I think these are all things you should be asking the person doing your brand. And I think that they should be able to offer you good information back and resources that you can have a look at. So I think that that's super important, and the discussions that like you and I are having now. In my community, there's not many people that you can ask these things or talk about it openly with. So it's really cool just to be able to hash it out and say, hey, I heard this. What do you think about that? And I think that any decent top would be able to have a chat with you about this too. I know that I've spoken to some really great branding tops, and they've been really open about sharing what they know. And if they don't know, they'll tell you that they don't know, and that they're happy to research it with you, which I think is always cool.
Yeah, I'm really lucky with my master that cigars is something that he has enjoyed significantly longer than I've been around that part of the scene, and he is actively open to and encourages education both by himself. He'll also give me other resources and point me to other spaces in the community, because he doesn't want to be my only resource on that. Because he's like, I'll teach you what I like and what I know, but I know that I'm not the end all be all. And so he's also encouraged me to find sources online, other kink people that offer it, and then we communicate about it. Same with the sort of branding situation. We've done a few, and we're looking to update some of ours. Our most recent was the one in April. It would have been April, I think. March or April. Yeah, I can't remember the month name. When we were up there together, spending some time together, because unfortunately, as much as Self is a wonderful event, they don't allow all of the cigar play aspects because of certain limitations of the space. There's a lot of cigar socials, but most play is highly restricted, unfortunately, but understandably.
Yeah, and I think that we have to be grateful for the spaces that we have that allow us to do these things. We're very restricted here, so I can't see it happening. I can't see something like branding happening at an event ever. But yeah, it's great to be able to connect with guys. I loved what you said about your master, and I think it's something that I just wanted to highlight about that idea that he has information and he's willing to share that with you, but he's also very clear that his information is limited to his experience, and that there are other sources out there, and that he is actively encouraging you to look for them. And I think more people should be doing those things. And I think information is such a valuable currency in kink, and it is so empowering. And I just love that you have that human in your life who's encouraging you to do those things and to learn more. And I think it's such a green flag. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that, because I think it's really cool. And it's hard to say to anybody that you don't know everything and that there are other resources. It's always hard to admit that. And I think anybody that can do that is incredible. And I think in kink that's so important. So yeah, any of you guys that are listening, if you're not in a partnership where your partner is not actively encouraging you to find other resources, you're not doing yourselves any favors. And what Ducky's just said is really important.
I absolutely understand and appreciate that, because it's something that's taken a while to learn on my end, on both sides of things, understanding that I should look for other resources and encouraging other people to do so. One thing that I've learned is there's a lot you can learn even from not great resources. Like, even if someone is problematic or doing stuff in a way that is outside your risk profile, there are still things that you can learn, even if it's how not to do something. So I think there's education all around us all the time, and trying to take that in is a great thing that we can do as people, just in life, but especially in kink, where if you're around other players, you can use that as a what to do and what not to do situation.
Yeah, I think I spent about 10 years of my life in my 20s not listening to what I should not do and trying it for myself. I've got vaguely better about that. Like, now I'm like, I can say that I can learn from a bad idea, and I don't need to attempt it myself first. Like, I can openly accept that bad ideas exist, and I don't have to practice them to accept that anymore. But it took me 10 years in my journey before I was willing to be a bit more self-aware and a bit more empowered in my choices, and listen to people a bit more openly. But I love your viewpoint and saying that everybody has a lesson for us, even if that lesson is not the best way to do things and it's the worst way to do things. It's still a lesson, and we should be open to learning it. I think that's a great point. And I think when we're talking about edge play and about things that are in that really make you take a look at your risk profile, you've mentioned a couple of times. I call it my risk purse or my risk budget. And how much have I got to spend, and what can I spend this week? And I've got better about budgeting, and I've got better about spending my little purse in places that are important to me, rather than spending it at yard sales and at dodgy bars.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you've seen my profile, so you know I do a lot of what people would consider dumb things that, are outside of most people's budget, which is completely understandable, and sometimes it's outside of mine. I mean, to be fair, this evening I plan to do a barbed wire self-suspension. Like, that's a thing that I'm just planning to do. And I'm okay with that. But most days, that's not a good plan. And knowing where that budget is for different people, for different days, that it changes so consistently is important.
Yeah, and I think the awareness that it needs to exist and that it has an impact on your life going forward. I'm loving your idea of a self-suspension. You're not encouraging me at all. No. I've been looking at
you're welcome to try, but it is I wouldn't recommend it.
Your robe's really good though, Ducky. You do a lot of self-suspension, and it's not something that you're going into blindly either. So I know we're laughing about it and joking about it, but I know from your profile that one of the things that I'm always in awe of is the fact that you are you always play with rope and you are experimental but you are careful, and you have the skill set that backs up what you're trying. So I have huge respect for that, and I know that we've connected being sharps players, and it's easy to connect like that. But I look at your rope and I'm always in awe, because I'm the girl that in 20 years of kink still has to watch a YouTube video to learn how to do a single column tie, and I must have gone to a million classes.
Well, maybe we can connect once you get your camera situations figured out, and I can show you the one that I use. That's one that I don't use all the time, but one that works and is safe and is easier than what most people teach. But I have a very different approach to teaching rope. It's what I do educate on when I do educate. Mostly on the sadistic side and hurting people with rope. But I really think that we should be making things like rope as accessible as possible. And that a lot of times we don't, but that's a conversation for a different day. This and that. But yeah, no, self-suspension with rope, it's edge play. All rope is edge play. Rope should always be considered edge play. But the barbed wire definitely adds a very different flavor to it that to be honest, I can't find any good educational resources on self-suspension for barbed wire, so I'm kind of winging it, which is why I don't recommend it to most people. But I'm also prepping to do my first suspension on someone else this coming weekend with barbed wire, so I was like, I need to do at least one more on myself. So...
I think that that's part of why I have so much respect for your work. Like even your sharp stuff, you're a lot like me in the thought process. Like I want to do this on somebody else. How does it feel? How does it work? My thigh looks like a great place to test out the process. Let me see what works better and see if X is better than Y, or and how it feels. And I love that. And I think that makes a great top, is somebody who's prepared to experience the kink.
Yes.
And I always say, like, it's really weird because I'm a CBT mistress. So I've never pierced my own penis because I don't have one, but I have pierced a lot of other things.
I've heard that piercing labia and piercing penises, and I can't say from feeling, but like you can get a pretty good idea from what I understand. And I have pierced my own labia and I've pierced someone else's dick, so I don't know how comparable it is. But
I don't know how comparable it is either.
Like the labia to the skin of the ball sack is actually pretty comparable from my experience.
I think ball sack is just, it's my favorite skin. There's just an ease of the way the needle goes through it, and yeah. It's my happy place. I really like. I haven't done CBT for a while, so you're making me smile thinking back about it. And I also think it's interesting because I think there's a difference in how penis owners feel pain compared to non-penis owners, and how penis owners deal with pain. And so I think it is different. But at least I have had practice throwing needles, so it's not my first time.
Exactly. There's a whole bunch that you can do to prepare, but regardless, it's one of those things where someone has come to me and asked before, like, do you expect your tops to have bottomed for something before they top you for it? And someone argued with me one time that there is absolutely no difference and it does nothing. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think that there is a lot that can be learned from bottoming for something in regards to topping for it in a more informed manner. However, because people process so differently any sensation, it's also not something I require, because like one of my first rope tops was highly claustrophobic, in the sake that like she tried to get suspended one time and almost passed out. And so, no, I don't expect her to be doing suspension bottoming just to be able to suspend me. But I appreciate the fact that she was willing to at least practice single columns on herself and understand the logistics and learn about how it works. And she communicated with me about how things felt. And I think if you're able and willing to feel the thing, it can be very helpful to at least get an idea. But you don't necessarily need to take something at the same level you're going to give it in order to do so. In my opinion, at least.
I love that.
Like
Ducky.
most sadists, even if they want to throw a whip and can get hit with a whip once or twice, don't want to be whipped until they bleed. But I want them to make me bleed with a whip. So if I expect every top I ever play with to have done the things, like, it'd be a little bit crazy with the stuff I do.
I was gonna say, you might not be finding many tops, Ducky. You might be a bit self-limiting in your process. I will say one thing about whips, and having used whips in my vanilla life and having used whips in kink. There is something about learning to whip that you're gonna hit yourself a good couple of times.
Oh yeah.
My pony came in from the field the other day when he had been playing on the farm with his whip, with this giant purple wrist and this huge purple welt all the way down his arm, and he's not a masochist. His pain is not his thing. He's learning to whip as a skill, and he wants to learn to crack them, and he makes them and he loves them, but it's not about pain for him. And he was like, I don't know why people do this. I really don't know why people do this. And I was having a good laugh. So I do think in learning something, you inevitably use it on yourself a good couple of times, especially with a whip.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we use them in our vanilla work, and I've hit myself more than I've hit other things in the beginning. So definitely part of the process. I'm interested to see your barbed wire. It's something I've been looking at the whole year, and making sort of costumes out of the barbed wire as sort of a framework, but I haven't quite got to the suspension part. I'm just getting my body used to the idea of the barbed wire at this point, and I'm just learning to work with it as a medium, just bend it and shape it and mold it, and it's hard. It's harder than you think it is. And
it absolutely is. And I will definitely say I jumped in pretty quickly. I had taken a class on it, specifically on suspension, a while back. And I have taken the classes through Rain of Blood that touched some on barbed wire in the use for the decorative side. So I do know some of the technicalities, and having the rope background definitely does help with going into suspension, because I obviously have a good amount of experience with suspension from rope, and so it's just a different way to lock it off, but at least understanding the theory behind where and how and what to load, I've already got pretty much down. Will say, though, it's a pretty big jump to go from the ground to the air. It's the one I did last time was very much not sustainable. And I wasn't intending it to be. I just wanted to feel what it felt like. The one I'm planning to do this weekend is a lot more sustainable, but it's not something I can do to myself as well because of the way the lift would have to be. Because with barbed wire, you can't really pull to lift as much. You have to do more of a placement. Whereas when you see someone doing rope, they can pull it and lift it at the same time. You can't really do that with barbed wire. So it makes it a little more complicated, but I highly recommend it. I playing with some of the partials in a way that some rope people do. Like if you do a bind on, say, the lower part of the leg, and then you do a wrap around the chest and you connect them so that you can use your body weight as something to kind of pull against, is a good way to get an idea of how something will start to feel. It's not the full pressure of gravity, but it allows you to play with uncontrolled weight, which I think can be helpful as a starting point.
I think you've touched on a whole bunch of topics with rope. This is not a rope podcast, but the one thing I wanted to say is, like, I went into rope. As a bunny, I've done quite a bit of rope. I've climbed quite a bit. It's not the same thing, but I'm not scared of heights, and I'm quite adventurous, and generally like the extremes. So my first introduction to kink was as a bunny. I was completely dishonest with the rigger and said to him that I knew everything and had all this experience, and I had none. And my first kink experience was a suspension. And I think the one thing, I never wanted to admit failure. And in that moment, I didn't admit failure. I just pushed through it. And, but, you see it, and it's a very beautiful, it can be painful, but it's generally a very beautiful picture. But the beautiful picture and the feeling that you're feeling when you're in the rope are two totally different things. So I can imagine that that is intensified by quite a substantial amount with barbed wire.
Yes,
because
I can tell you.
Yeah, I think that must be quite intense. I think that must be, and that must be quite a mindfuck to keep that, to sustain that. I'm just picturing it in my head, and I have to tell you, my idea for my suspension, I had already managed to cheat the barbed wire in my head and close off some of the barbs at the back for where the pressure points were going to be for the first
that
one.
would help. That would probably help. I didn't make that choice. And because I have such a history with rope, I actually, once I started getting in the air, kind of didn't think about the fact that I was in barbed wire and started moving like I would in rope. And actually ended up cutting and scarring myself because of it. Because, I think it's as important to be like, oh yeah, I did this cool, badass thing, but also admit, like, doing that badass thing had major consequences. Thankfully, no infections or anything like that, because I know a decent amount of wound care and all that. But the worst that happened to me is because I got cocky and I took my hand down and I ran next to the harness and cut myself.
Oh, no.
And I think that's probably part of why they don't have much on self suspension with barbed wire, because you really got to stay so much in the moment, and you want to just space out when you're in it. And that extra presence, like, it really is important. And, that's part of why I do a lot of what I do to myself, at least first, because, okay, if I damage me, I damage me, at least within what I have permission for. And, worst case, I damage myself. I'm not damaging someone else. And, sometimes it's a good chance to learn some of those lessons. I'm willing to take more risk because I know what my risk budget looks like. And it's pretty big. I have very little self-preservation because so what? I don't think that that's healthy for most people. Probably shouldn't be for me, but it's how it is. So, but yeah,
life would be boring if we were all the same. I have to say, like, I don't regret any of the crazy things I've done. I have definitely got better about risk mitigation and about managing that as I've got older. Thank God, because otherwise I would be a nightmare to be around, and I would be a nightmare for all my friends. And I'm not sure they love me half as much as they do. But yeah, I've loved chatting to you about all of this stuff, and it's so good to connect with you again. I really value you and appreciate you, and always appreciate your time. And Rain of Fire appreciates you, and we've loved chatting to you tonight. Duckey, thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime. It was great to chat.
Yay. And to all my listeners, if you don't have your ticket, I don't know what you're doing with your life. I have just put the on-demand together, and we have some amazing classes. Currently, we have 25 really cool classes. We have nearly 40 podcasts in our Rain of Fire, and a whole bunch of links and other fire information that you don't want to miss out on. That's going live on the 1st of July. So grab your tickets as quickly as possible so that you don't miss out on all of this cool info. And then working with the presenters to put your festival together for the end of July. It's getting close. We're nearly a month away. We're so excited. The whole presenter room is excited. it's been so incredible to connect with all of these humans and just to get this community together and to chat with them. My admin team is amazing as always. I shout out to the incredible Solaris and the equally incredible Radically Dark, who it's just always a privilege working with. So if you don't have your ticket, guys, get it. If you need a scholarship, please get hold of us. We're quite happy. We believe education is for everyone and everyone should have access to it. Price should not be a barrier to education in our minds. And we hope that you are staying warm and keeping lit. And from my dungeon in Cape Town, to you, wherever you are, lots of love and kitten kisses.